Okay, people can see my slides all right now? Great. So my name is Rich Knepper. I am the manager for Cyberinfrastructure Resource Integration in the Exceed project, in addition to being the deputy director for Center for Advanced Computing at Cornell University. And I'll be talking a little bit about our team and the work that we've done to support campus cyber infrastructure across the nation. I'm contractually bound to talk a little bit about the Exceed project. I think most folks here are fairly familiar with it. This is access to resources at national supercomputing centers, as well as training on how to use the resources, assistance in programming and refining codes, consulting on applications, and much more. My team helps with integrating technology on campuses, and what we do is essentially try and stimulate the growth of local cyber infrastructure by providing best practices from the national centers, as well as providing sort of input and a place where people can learn and grow out their own campus infrastructure. So the activities that we support are really designed to help support folks on campus who are dealing with challenges. And what we find is that these are sort of two things. One is easy to install and maintain software for infrastructure. And the other thing is generally providing sort of a fabric of folks that can work together and provide answers when they run into things. So we found a real desire for collaborations on best practices, everything from how do we deal with software packages up to what should my queuing policy be. So bringing together that kind of experience and information it doesn't pay to keep that locked up in the national centers, and giving people access to this experience has been really helpful to campuses that have been implementing with us. So to that end, we've provided these toolkits for CI integration. There's an OpenHPC installation toolkit that smooths out the installation of an OpenHPC cluster, a virtual cluster toolkit that runs a traditional cluster on top of an OpenStack cloud, base architecture and best practices for deploying an OpenStack cloud, and an application container template library that helps people get started using containers for their scientific applications. We also provide this consulting service that I'll go into in a little bit further detail further on in my presentation. And in addition to that, we are the management area within Exceed for service provider coordination. So when campuses have large scale resources and they want to integrate with Exceed, we have a representative that handles that step to help bring them on board. And we also help folks with letters of support for their NSF MRIs or CC stars or other proposals in terms of providing an implementation plan, some architectural guidelines, or any kind of other information that people might be interested in. So the cluster toolkit provides a cluster deployment kit that's based on OpenHPC. It uses Werewolf for the management tool and a Slurm scheduler. We've also adapted it with one of our collaborators to extend it to use the XCAT management tool. And the approach that we've largely taken with this is to basically put as little in as smoothly as possible, so that the system administrator can provide minimal information and get a cluster install. So there's Ansible scripts that help the deployment. Everything is set up to run off of a Pixie boot service so that your nodes are easy to deploy. We also have a number of infrastructure tools to help install the Open on Demand toolkit, which is a user interface for clusters that provides them with sort of a web means of accessibility, and OpenXDMod that provides metrics for running the service as well. The virtual cluster toolkit runs the same cluster software stack on a cloud resource. So what we've done this on the Jetstream cloud, and we've also done it on our Cornell Red Cloud service. So we can present virtual machines to users that are essentially a head node of a cluster. And as they submit a job, we use OpenStack API calls to instantiate workers as long as there are jobs in the queue. So it's an elastic cloud or an elastic cluster that starts and stops resources as the needs of the cluster go. So it's expansive. Our OpenStack base architecture, there's a lot of ins and outs to installing an on-premise cloud, and there's lots of ways to do it. What we've tried to do is to provide a means of installing this that helps folks who have limited resources, who are looking at a research-focused service, and try to get the set of OpenStack modules and configurations that are most useful to people doing an on-campus deployment. And so we've taken expertise from the folks who run the OpenStack cloud at Cornell, who are running the Jetstream cloud at Indiana University, and trying to sort of provide that information more broadly and help people get started deploying their on-premise clouds. Finally, the container template is an effort to provide lightweight and reproducible containers for research software, so that if you have a particular piece of software that's difficult to install or needs to be a workflow, we want to provide a means for researchers to pick that up and work with it quickly and continue to return to that application container. So, and most of the many of the resources on Exceed support application containers through Singularity. You can also run containers in the public cloud if you need to. So it gives researchers quite a bit of flexibility for the resources that they want to choose. And the effort that we've provided also always uses the same software versions when the container is instantiated. So it becomes a reproducible software artifact rather than having to track versions as you go and understand which of all the components are part of that software. So if you're interested in any of these, you can get them through our GitHub site, which is at github.com/exceed. All of the repos are listed there. In terms of consulting, when we started our efforts back in 2011, what we really built up our service was that we would send an engineer to your site and set up a cluster with you. Since the pandemic, that model has been somewhat disrupted. But what we generally do at this point is do remote consulting, do some screen sharing, and help people get started. And these are for campuses that have hardware, either they've purchased it or they've had a donation, or we've had campuses that have basically been pulling together machines that are existing that they want to integrate into a cluster because of that's the resources they have available to them. And we work with that group to figure out the scope. What are the goals of the program? What do they need that resource to do? How should it be implemented? And what kind of policies maybe they want to apply to it? And previously, we would sort of do a set of scoping meetings and then have our engineer go out for a week. And at the end of that week, the cluster would be there and ready to use, ideally. Currently, what we've sort of done is set up sets of recurring meetings that aren't quite so intensive, but get people where they're going. And it really just requires a local IT person to set aside some time and work with our folks. We've also done a series of engagements with campuses that may have existing resources or have a whole program. And these tend to be sort of question and answer, reality check, or sometimes reassurance that people are doing the right thing. And these have covered everything from, as I said earlier, what package manager do folks use, all the way up to how should we configure queues, how do we do billing for cost recovery types of systems. So everything from sort of the nuts and bolts of getting things set up out to user management in the sort of social sense, and how to deal with working with folks. So in our time working with campuses, we've done deployments at a pretty wide range of universities. I don't even have all of them on the list, but some of those are representative. We've done these engagements with Arizona State and Brown, Oral Roberts University. Right now we have a very interesting collaboration that's sort of spanning the state of Oklahoma, where we've been working with University of Central Oklahoma, Southwest Oklahoma State. They want to get Southeast Oklahoma State involved. And so they're working towards making, I think, a CC Star play to try and get a shared resource for those campuses. And so what we've been able to do at this point is yes, we've propagated the best practices out to the community, but we're also starting to collect some of the concerns and some of their issues to refine and improve our own offerings. And we've had folks bring in pull requests for our software well after the fact that we've worked with them. We're starting to really put together sort of a long-term relationship and a network of folks that we've been working with over time that we support them over time, but they also are beginning to support each other through various different lists and sort of the broader CI network. So in the past 10 years, we've been able to come up with these toolkits and the documentation associated. I'll share links again at the end. These efforts have supported over a teraflop of aggregate capacity and a few thousand users at this point. We've helped people map out what they want to purchase, what their architecture would be. And I think we're around 10 letters of support for MRIs or CC stars, and we've within that a couple of winners. I think we've supported about 2 winners at this point. So while we've been working with campuses, what we found is that time is really a bigger barrier than skills or experience. If people are willing to set aside the time and work with us, then they can really get to a resource that is valuable to their users and provides the kind of utility that they need. And early on, we found that this was it was very useful to have a visitor come to campus and have sort of a catalyzing event that, okay, this person is coming, we need to get things ready, and at the end of it, we'll have a cluster. That works great. We were kind of shy about doing remote consultations, but what we found is that being able to space it out gives folks a little bit of time to learn, to try things out, and then come back with their experiences for the next call. It's a longer overall time to deploy, but people also are able to learn quite a bit. The more we work with campuses, as we see in the state of Oklahoma example I talked about earlier, we start to see folks building momentum. They're able to handle, one thing. They'll call back in a couple of months and say, we want to add GPUs, or we want to completely rebuild things and do something different. And so what we find is that this really builds an ability to sort of experiment and stretch out. And furthermore, most of the folks that we've worked with also want to collaborate with either other folks in their vicinity who are supporting research, or put together collaborative proposals, or in the case of some, become service providers for the Exceed project. So this really seems to have stemmed kind of a broader networking effort. And we do tend to have these long-running relationships. We've had, there are folks that we've worked with at this point for 4 and 5 years of not constant support for their cluster. We never come to a campus with the intention of leaving a black box that we've set up and nobody else can handle. The idea is that the local IT staff are in the driver's seat. They run things, but oftentimes they will come back to us and ask for advice, or has anybody run into something like this? And so we build up a running relationship where we give them feedback and they give us feedback. And it's been very valuable to the folks we've consulted with, as well as helped us sort of stretch our project to try on some new things. And finally, a lot of campuses that have established programs are also looking for input. They want to understand what their peers are doing, what kind of concerns the broader community is looking at, and how are they being dealt with. So we're able to sort of spread that information around, and it's been very useful, as I said, for universities that have what I would think of as long running programs for research IT. If you're interested in working with us, you can email help@exceed.org. Please CC me at richknepper@cornell.edu. You can also find us online on the Exceed site, on GitHub, and on our Read the Docs site. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Rich.